The hallway was a tunnel of whispers and sharpened laughter, each step Talia took drawing the predators closer. They thought her silence was surrender, that her lowered gaze meant she would endure whatever they decided to inflict. But beneath her stillness, something coiled, steady, waiting. When the final shove came, she did not fall. She rose, and the air itself seemed to shift, as if the walls knew a reckoning had just begun. The girls' locker room lay in an unnatural stillness, as if the building itself had taken a deep breath and was holding it. Pale bars of light hummed overhead, the flicker of tired fluorescent tubes casting a cold, unforgiving glow across the rows of dented metal lockers. Somewhere in the distance, a single water droplet tapped steadily into a drain, a quiet metronome marking the absence of voices. Talia Monroe moved through the silence with the quiet economy of someone who had learned to keep herself small in shared spaces. She set her duffel bag down on the bench, unzipping it with slow precision, the teeth of the zipper rasping in the empty room. Her gym shirt clung damp to her back from the final sprint of class, the faint scent of chalk dust and rubber mats still clinging to her skin. She glanced instinctively at the far end of the room to make sure she was alone. The last echoes of laughter from the other girls had faded a few minutes ago, leaving her with this pocket of solitude. She had waited for it. She always did. With a small exhale, she reached for the hem of her shirt, pulling it upward over her head. The cotton peeled away from her skin, sticking slightly where sweat had cooled. For a moment, her bare shoulders caught the sterile light, and there it was. A scar, pale against the rich tone of her skin, cut a diagonal line across her right shoulder blade. It was not the jagged chaos of an accident. It was clean, deliberate, the kind of mark that spoke of discipline, of long hours spent in controlled, punishing practice. The edges of the scar were faintly raised, the tissue smoothed by time but never erased. Talia had stopped trying to explain it years ago. Most people never saw it. That was by design. Loose shirts, quick changes, and a constant awareness of her surroundings had made the scar invisible to the world. But here, under the stark lights, she was exposed in a way she could not see. On the other side of the thin metal door, Sierra Clayton stood with one eye pressed to the narrow ventilation slit. Her phone was angled perfectly, the lens just catching the reveal, as Talia's shirt cleared her shoulders. Sierra's lips curved in a slow, predatory smile. The red recording light on her screen blinked with quiet hunger. For Sierra, this was not about curiosity. It was about leverage. She zoomed in slightly, framing the scar in the center of the shot, drinking in the details as though committing them to memory. The pale line against Talia's skin was more than just a mark. It was a keyhole, and Sierra intended to find out exactly what lay behind the door it opened. Inside, Talia tugged a clean hoodie from her bag, a vivid teal that set off her dark curls, and pulled it over her head. Her movements were unhurried, unaware that her brief moment of vulnerability had already been captured, immortalized in pixels. She gathered her gym clothes, dropped them into a plastic sack, and began lacing her red sneakers with calm, practiced fingers. Beyond the door, Sierra stopped recording. She lowered the phone, checked the footage, and replayed the moment when the scar caught the light. Satisfaction flickered in her eyes. The image was clear enough to tell a story, even if that story had yet to be written. Her thumbs moved quickly, navigating to a private group chat. The members were carefully chosen, each one sharing a taste for the kind of games that made the rest of the school uncomfortable. She typed 2 words, "Bay found." Then she added the perfect punctuation, a small golden coin emoji. A single press of her thumb, and the video was in motion, bouncing from one device to the next like a spark catching dry tinder. Inside the locker room, Talia slung her duffel over her shoulder and stepped toward the door, still wrapped in the quiet, still thinking she was unseen. Her mind was already turning to the next class, the homework waiting in her bag, the comfortable predictability of her routine. But on Sierra's phone, the message had landed. On the group chat screen, the thumbnail of the video glowed against a dark background. One by one, reaction icons began to bloom beneath it. Wide-eyed faces, smirking mouths, eager flames. The feed scrolled upward as comments appeared, each one sharper, more intrigued than the last. A set of eyes in the corner of the frame, watching from a digital distance, widened with intent. The spark had caught, and though Talia could not yet feel the heat, the air around her life was about to change. The corridor of Maple Ridge High roared with the restless tide of students moving between classes. Lockers slammed like percussion, a steady drumbeat beneath the shrill echo of the bell's final note. The scent of floor polish lingered faintly in the air, mingling with the sweet-sour tang of cafeteria breakfasts, clinging to backpacks and jackets. Talia Monroe stepped into the current of bodies, her teal hoodie vivid against the muted sea of denim and gray. She kept her duffel bag slung across one shoulder, her gaze trained forward, the way a runner fixes on the track ahead. Every step was a calculation: how to move without brushing too close, how to slide past the unpredictable surges of the crowd. She was 3 lockers past the gym doors when a voice, low and authoritative, cut through the din. "Hold up. Bag check." The school security officer was already stepping into her path. His navy windbreaker caught the overhead light, the embroidered badge on his chest glinting faintly. Talia stopped, tightening her grip on the strap of her duffel. "Is there a reason?" she asked, keeping her voice even. "Random search," he replied, though his eyes flickered briefly, assessing her from head to toe. Around them, students slowed, glancing sideways, curiosity snagging like burrs. Talia felt the weight of those looks settle across her shoulders. She unzipped the duffel, folding back the fabric so he could peer inside. Her gym clothes, still damp from the morning's class, slumped at the bottom beside a pair of clean sneakers and a paperback novel. He rifled through with 2 fingers, lingering longer than necessary on the interior seams before giving a curt nod. "All right, go ahead." By the time she stepped back into the flow of students, her cheeks burned. She could still feel the eyes on her, the silent question they carried. She pressed forward. Near the science wing, a teacher stood at the threshold of her classroom, clipboard in hand. "ID cards," she called as students approached. Talia reached into her hoodie pocket and produced hers. The teacher took it between 2 fingers, scrutinizing the laminated surface for far longer than she had with the student ahead of Talia, a tall boy in a Letterman jacket who had breezed past with barely a glance. The teacher's eyes flicked up, meeting Talia's for a moment that felt colder than the metal lockers lining the hall. Finally, she handed the card back without a word. Talia slid it into her pocket, her pulse tapping a quick rhythm against her ribs. She told herself not to dwell on it, to keep moving. She was almost at the central atrium when a pair of girls came toward her from the opposite direction, laughter curling from their lips like ribbons. One reached out, not to touch her, but to gesture at the crown of her head. "Did you try to do something different with your hair?" the girl asked, her voice dipped in sugar. "It's bold." The other smirked, eyes glancing at the tightly coiled curls that framed Talia's face. The implication clung in the air like humidity. Talia felt the familiar tightening in her chest. She gave no answer, just stepped past them, each footfall a deliberate act of self-control. Then she saw Sierra. Leaning against a bank of lockers near the east stairwell, Sierra Clayton stood like the axis of her own small universe. Aubrey Hill and Maya Brooks flanked her, their posture angled outward as if marking territory. Lena Park lingered at the edge, her arms folded, gaze sharp. When Talia approached, Sierra's smile was not warm, though it was artful. "Morning, Talia," she said, the syllables drawn out like the slow pull of thread from fabric. "We were just talking about you." "M?" Talia kept her voice steady. "About what?" "Oh, just certain things we have noticed." Sierra's gaze dipped ever so slightly toward Talia's shoulder, the teal fabric hiding what only Sierra's camera had seen. Aubrey's mouth curved. "You know how secrets work. Some are too good to keep." Maya leaned in. "Sometimes they are worth quite a bit." Before Talia could respond, movement at the edge of her vision drew her attention. Officer Harper, the school's community liaison, was making her way down the hall, clipboard in hand. She was in her early 40s, with a calmness in her stride that seemed immune to the teenage chaos around her. As she passed, her eyes swept over Talia and Sierra's group. She slowed, pen poised, and jotted something on her notepad before continuing toward the stairwell. The moment was brief, but it left a faint ripple in Talia's awareness. Harper's gaze had not been casual. It had been measuring. Sierra's voice reclaimed her focus. "Anyway, we will see you around," she said lightly, though her eyes held an unspoken promise that the conversation was not finished. Talia stepped past them, her pace slow enough to catch the edges of their words. From behind her came Sierra's tone, hushed but urgent. "Connor says the game is on." The amount doubled. Connor Hayes. The name landed like a stone in Talia's thoughts. She had seen him around, tall, with the confident bearing of someone who never questioned his place at the top of the food chain. His crew occupied a different orbit than Sierra's, but if they were speaking to each other about a game and a sum of money, it meant trouble was stitching itself together across lines that were usually separate. Maya's voice followed, sharp with anticipation. 50,000 split between whoever wins. Aubrey's laugh was soft, but it held an edge. And I think we both know who has the advantage. The crowd's noise swallowed the rest as Talia turned the corner into the main hall, but the words trailed her like the echo of a closing door. A game. A sum of money. And her name caught in the middle. The bell for the next class rang again. Louder this time. A clarion over the rush of bodies. But for Talia, the sound seemed to come from far away. Her mind was already trying to piece together the rules of a game she had never agreed to play. Somewhere behind her, a message had already been sent, and somewhere else, unseen, someone was waiting for her next move. The crowd in the hallway had thinned to scattered pockets of conversation when a hand closed firmly around Talia's wrist. Talia, Naomi's voice was a hurried whisper, low enough to be lost under the echo of a distant locker door slamming. Come with me. Before Talia could reply, Naomi was already steering her toward the glass doors that opened onto the east courtyard. The autumn air swept in as they stepped outside, carrying the faint scent of cut grass and the chill of a morning that had not fully given way to the day's warmth. They crossed the concrete path, passing the shadow of the maple trees that gave the school its name, until Naomi brought them to a corner where two brick walls met at a sharp angle. It was a blind spot, out of sight from most of the windows above. Naomi released her wrist but did not step back. Her eyes searched Talia's face with an urgency that made the space between them feel smaller than it was. You need to stop walking through the halls like nothing is happening, Naomi said. Her voice trembled, not with anger, but with a kind of brittle fear. I saw Sierra talking to Connor. I do not know exactly what they are planning, but I know you do not want to be in the middle of it. Talia's shoulders stiffened. You think I am looking for trouble? I think trouble is looking for you, Naomi replied. She glanced over her shoulder, scanning the empty stretch of courtyard as if expecting it to fill suddenly. They have their eyes on you, and once they decide they want something, they will not stop. You should just stay out of their way. The words were meant as advice, but they landed on Talia's chest like the pressure of a hand pushing her down. She had heard them before, in different forms. Stay quiet, be polite, let it pass. But letting it pass had never stopped anything. It had only made her smaller. Still, Naomi's fear was real. Talia could see it in the way her friend's fingers curled into the sleeves of her sweater, in the way her gaze kept breaking away. Why are you so sure it will be worse for us? Talia asked, though she already knew part of the answer. Naomi's jaw tightened. Because it always is. You have seen it. One wrong move, and suddenly we are the problem. Not them. The air between them held the weight of unspoken memories, detentions handed out unevenly, accusations accepted without proof, the constant quiet calculations of how to move without drawing the wrong kind of attention. Talia felt the words pressing against her teeth, the instinct to push back, to tell Naomi that fear was not the same as safety. But something in her friend's expression made her pause. Naomi was not trying to hold her back out of malice. She was trying to protect her the only way she knew how. A bell rang inside the building, scattering the thought. Naomi exhaled and looked away. Just promise me you will think about it. They walked back in silence, the sound of their footsteps merging with the hum of students changing classes. In the classroom, the scent of dry erase markers hung in the air. Talia slipped into her seat by the window, unzipping her bag and pulling out her notebook. The door opened again, and Officer Harper entered, not in a rush, but with the deliberate pace of someone whose presence was its own statement. She wore the same navy blouse and neat trousers Talia had seen her in before, her hair pulled back in a low knot. Harper's gaze swept the room, lingering for the briefest moment on Talia. Then she walked past, a manila folder tucked under her arm, and laid a single folded pamphlet on Talia's desk. It was thin, the paper still warm from the copy machine, its front marked with bold black letters, "Know your right to report bullying." Harper said nothing, but her eyes met Talia's. There was no command in them, no pity, only a steady invitation, as if to say, you do not have to let them decide the rules. Then she moved on, speaking quietly with the teacher at the front before leaving the way she had come. Talia rested her fingers on the pamphlet. The paper was smooth beneath her touch, but the words on its cover felt heavy. She slipped it into the front pocket of her notebook, her mind already replaying the look in Harper's eyes. The class settled into the rhythm of lectures and note-taking, but Talia's focus drifted. She thought of Naomi's warning, of the deliberate way Sierra had said, "We were just talking about you." She thought of the scar on her shoulder, and the phone lens she had not seen but could now feel as clearly as if it had been a breath against her skin. Her phone vibrated against the inside of her hoodie pocket. She waited until the teacher turned to write on the board before sliding it out, the glow of the screen bright in the dim classroom light. A new message waited, from an unlisted number. "This time your brother will not be able to save you." The words were stark, unadorned, and they seemed to reach beyond the glass of the screen to touch the back of her neck. Malik's face flashed in her mind, steady, unshakable, but even his presence felt far away now, separated by the cold certainty that whoever had sent this knew exactly how to aim their threat. Talia locked the phone and set it face down on her desk. The edges of her vision seemed sharper, as if the world had narrowed to the shape of that message. Outside the window, a lone maple leaf spiraled downward, its descent silent and certain. In the stillness of the moment, she knew something had shifted. Whatever game had begun in whispers was moving closer, and it was coming for her. The principal's office smelled faintly of lemon polish and dust, a mix that clung to the air as if time here moved differently. The fluorescent light hummed above, a flat, sterile glow spilling over a mahogany desk that seemed too large for the room. Behind it, the leather chair was empty. Only a thick folder sat in the center, edges worn, its corners bent from being opened too many times. Talia's name was printed on a white label across the spine. The sight made her chest tighten. She stood in the doorway, feeling the threshold like a border she did not want to cross. Dean Whitmore entered without looking at her, his footsteps deliberate, his hands carrying the weight of unspoken judgments. He set a ceramic mug beside the folder, steam rising from the coffee in thin, restless spirals. Without sitting, he flipped the folder open. "Miss Carter," he began, his voice measured, almost bored, as if this were another routine item on his day's checklist. "Do you know why you are here?" Talia shook her head slowly, her fingers curled into her palms. She could feel the air from the vent above pushing down on her, heavy and stale. "It is about your brother," Whitmore said, eyes lifting to measure her reaction. "Malik Carter. I assume you have been in touch with him." The mention of Malik's name was a blade, slicing through the thin calm she had forced over herself. She straightened, meeting his gaze. "He has nothing to do with this." Whitmore's lips twitched, somewhere between a smile and a smirk. He drew out a paper from the folder, a printed list of disciplinary records, highlighted in yellow. "This," he tapped the page, "is not about one incident. It is about a pattern. Fights, defiance, questioning authority. Your family seems to attract trouble." Talia's pulse quickened. She recognized some of the lines, but others were distortions, exaggerated retellings of moments that had nothing to do with aggression and everything to do with survival. She wanted to speak, to tear apart each accusation, but her throat felt locked. Whitmore leaned back slightly. "You see, Miss Carter, when you come from certain backgrounds, the choices you make here matter more than you think. One wrong step, and it follows you. Like it followed Malik." The way he said backgrounds made the air in the room shift. It was not about the facts in the folder. It was about what he believed she represented. She felt the sting of it deep inside, an old, familiar wound being pressed. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but his hand rose, cutting her off. "I suggest you stay out of situations that might escalate. People are watching, and your history does not work in your favor." A knock interrupted the thick silence. The door opened, and Harper stepped in. She moved with quiet precision, as if she knew the air in the room was already fragile. Her badge hung from her belt, catching the light. "Dean Whitmore," she said evenly, "I need a moment with Miss Carter." "Alone." Whitmore arched an eyebrow. "We are in the middle of something." "It will not take long," Harper replied. Her tone was calm, but there was something beneath it, a thread of urgency, tightly pulled. Whitmore hesitated, then sighed and stepped back. "2 minutes," he said, gathering the folder but leaving it open on the desk. As he exited, the room seemed to breathe again. Harper closed the door softly and crossed to Talia, sliding a folded piece of paper onto the desk. Talia unfolded it. A flyer, plain text, black ink, titled, "Know Your Rights, Reporting Bullying and Harassment." Beneath it were steps, phone numbers, and a bold line. "You do not have to remain silent." Harper's eyes met hers. "You might need this sooner than you think," she said quietly. Before Talia could respond, a burst of static crackled from Harper's radio. The voice on the other end was urgent. "Multiple suspicious individuals spotted on school grounds. Repeat, possible threats inside." Harper's head turned slightly, listening, but her gaze never left Talia. The sound of her own heartbeat roared in Talia's ears. Something larger than the petty cruelty of the hallway was moving closer, its shadow already stretching over the day. In that moment, the desk, the folder, the stale air, all of it fell away. Only Harper's steady, unblinking stare remained, and in it, Talia saw both a warning and an unspoken promise. The world outside the office might still see her as a file in a cabinet, a name underlined in yellow. But here, right now, Harper was telling her, without words, that she was more than that and that whatever was coming, they would face it with eyes open. And yet, in the space between their locked gazes, Talia knew this was no rescue. It was a call to be ready. The afternoon bell had rung long enough ago that most of the day's noise had already drained from the campus. The great tide of footsteps and laughter had ebbed, leaving only small eddies of sound scattered here and there. The sky was slipping from gold to amber, and the sun hung low, painting the edges of the brick buildings in warm light that was already starting to fade. Beyond the playground fence, the town's distant hum felt like another world entirely, too far to help, too far to hear. Talia sat alone on the far edge of the schoolyard, where the benches were warped from years of rain and sun. The grain of the wood pressed into her palms as she held the seat's edge, backpack propped against her knees. She had chosen this spot deliberately, far enough from the main walkway to avoid the casual glances of strangers, but close enough to the gate to leave quickly if she needed to. Naomi lingered beside her, one foot tracing idle arcs in the dust, as if she could draw her way out of the moment. She kept glancing toward the main building, toward the parking lot where late buses idled. Her body was here, but her mind seemed already halfway gone. "I should get going," Naomi said at last, her voice carefully light, as if wrapping the words in gauze would soften their impact. Talia lifted her head. "You do not have to." "I promised my aunt I would help with dinner," Naomi interrupted, eyes shifting toward the far wall of the school. "It is nothing. You will be fine." She tried to smile. It was the kind of smile that felt more like a door closing than one opening. Talia's gaze followed Naomi's earlier glance. Against the sun-warmed brick, Sierra stood with three of her friends, silhouettes rimmed with dying light. Sierra's blonde hair caught the last flare of the sun, and her stance, weight on one leg, arms loosely folded, spoke of someone content to wait until the right moment to strike. Her friends leaned into her words, laughing too softly for the wind to carry. A cold awareness uncurled in Talia's chest. She had heard stories about Sierra, how she held grudges like family heirlooms and knew exactly when to take them out and use them. Naomi bent to sling her bag over her shoulder, but her eyes avoided Talia's entirely. The unspoken truth between them was sharp enough to cut. Naomi was leaving because she did not want to be here when whatever this was began. Talia watched her walk away, each step diminishing the fragile shelter her presence had provided. The gate swallowed Naomi whole, leaving Talia with only the hollow echo of parting footsteps. The air shifted almost immediately. Sierra's group began to drift from the wall, their pace casual, their laughter unbroken, but their direction unmistakable. From the opposite side of the yard, Connor emerged with his own small cluster. They came from the gym side, their shadows stretching long in the low light. Connor's stride was slow, deliberate, as though every step were a choice he had already weighed and decided upon. Talia's mind sharpened in the way it always did when the edges of danger grew near. Sierra and Connor were not supposed to be allies. Everyone knew they orbited different spheres, sometimes hostile, sometimes indifferent, but never overlapping. Their rivalry had been a constant in the school's quiet social wars. And yet, here they were, both moving toward her, their paths set to intersect precisely where she sat. It was like watching two dark tides rolling in from opposite ends of the shore. The distance between them closed, and instead of the expected collision, they slowed, exchanged a single silent nod, and redirected their focus entirely onto her. Talia's pulse thudded in her ears. The bench's cool metal frame pressed against her back, a physical reminder that she had nowhere to retreat except forward, into their circle. Sierra arrived first, her voice smooth and measured, like glass that could cut without warning. "Seems like you have been getting a lot of attention lately." Connor's smile was thin, without warmth. "People are talking, Talia. You have a way of drawing eyes." The words were neither compliment nor simple observation. They were a warning wrapped in silk. Their friends fanned out, closing the perimeter. A careful choreography, practiced enough to feel effortless, left her boxed in. The open yard was suddenly smaller, the soft twilight giving way to a more claustrophobic shadow. Talia straightened her spine. "What do you want?" Her voice was even, but she could feel the churn of adrenaline beneath it, the instinctive scan for exits, for witnesses. A new sound joined the fading ambient noise, the faint, deliberate jangle of metal. Lena stepped forward from behind Sierra, emerging like a secondary figure from a painting, unnoticed at first glance, but suddenly central to its meaning. Her dark hair framed a face that revealed nothing, and in her right hand she held a ring of maintenance keys, their steel teeth catching stray fragments of sunlight. She let them swing gently, the clink and chime loud in the hushed yard. "There is a place," Lena said, her voice soft enough that it made the others lean slightly forward to hear. "Perfect for talking without interruptions." The way she said it carried no overt threat, but something in her tone implied there was no choice in the matter. She tilted her head, studying Talia as if considering where best to place her on some invisible map. The keys swung once more, glinting, the sound sharp and clean in the cooling air. It was a sound that could just as easily herald the opening of a door as the turning of a lock behind someone. Talia's gaze flicked between Sierra's expectant stare, Connor's unreadable half-smile, and Lena's calm certainty. The circle felt like it had been drawn days ago, and she had simply stepped into it without knowing. The last threads of daylight pulled away from the yard, leaving only the dull wash of the overhead lamps beginning to hum to life. And still, no one else lingered within shouting distance. It was in that suspended moment, half trapped in the past, half bracing for the future, that Talia understood. This was not a coincidence. It was not an impulsive cornering. It had been planned. Planned with the patience of people who had waited for the right day, the right hour, the right absence of witnesses. The keys in Lena's hand gleamed once more, catching the final slip of sunlight before night claimed the schoolyard. The sound of them swinging was no longer just a noise. It was a marker, a signal that the next step had already been decided. And when Lena's eyes met hers, Talia felt the quiet urgency of something far larger than the moment pressing in from all sides. The corridor was colder than the rest of the building, as if the air itself had been forgotten here. Paint peeled from the walls in long curling strips, revealing layers of color that told the building's history better than any archive could. A faint smell of dampness clung to everything, seeping through the cracked tiles beneath their shoes. Lena's cousin, a wiry man with a face hardened by years of manual labor, knelt at the heavy door at the far end of the hall. His movements were precise, almost rehearsed, his hands knowing exactly which key to choose from the tarnished ring that jingled faintly in the stillness. "Quick," Lena urged under her breath, her eyes darting back toward the brighter part of the hallway. "We do not want anyone seeing us here." The cousin inserted a key, turned it with a soft click, and the latch yielded. The door creaked open, revealing a darkness that felt thicker than shadow. He gave Lena a curt nod before disappearing without a word, leaving only the fading echo of his boots. They stepped inside. The abandoned wing was not entirely dead. A single portable work light, perched on an old sink, bathed the space in a harsh, white glare that made the shadows sharper. The cracked mirrors above the sink reflected fractured images of everyone who entered, bending and splitting them into ghostly doubles. The ceiling tiles sagged in some places, exposing rusted pipes. It was a bathroom once, but now it looked like a crude studio. A folding table sat in the center, surrounded by mismatched chairs dragged from different parts of the building. On the table lay a tangled mess of extension cords, a battered tripod, and a camera pieced together from parts that did not belong to the same brand. Talia hesitated on the threshold. Her instinct screamed to turn around, but the semicircle of bodies behind her left no path to retreat. The door clicked shut with a finality that made the space seem even smaller. Sierra leaned against the wall, her arms folded. Not so glamorous now, are you? Her voice was casual, but there was an edge beneath it. Talia kept her eyes steady, though her pulse was uncomfortably loud in her ears. What is this? Lena moved to the table, picking up the tripod as if it were a piece of art she was proud of. It is where we collect stories, she said, her smile tight and unreadable. Connor emerged from the far corner, carrying a laptop. His expression was neither smug nor friendly, only cold, as though this moment had nothing to do with emotion. He set the device on the table, flipped it open, and the dim room was lit by the pale glow of the screen. Sit, he said. It was not a request. Talia stayed standing. Fine, Connor murmured, his fingers gliding over the trackpad. Then watch from there. The screen displayed a string of messages in a chat window. The sender's name was hidden under a generic username, but the words were unmistakably deliberate. Payment in advance. Deliver complete footage and personal details of both targets. Below the message was a thumbnail of a transaction receipt. Connor tapped it open. The number was not small. It was the kind of money that could tilt loyalty, the kind that could make someone choose silence over conscience. The amount pulsed on the screen in stark, unforgiving digits, the currency symbol like a seal of temptation. No one spoke for a moment. Even the faint hum of the work light seemed distant, as if the air had tightened. Talia's chest rose and fell, the reality of the moment solidifying with every heartbeat. Who sent that? Connor's gaze did not waver. Does it matter? It matters to me, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Sierra stepped closer, her shadow stretching across the cracked tiles. What matters is what you are going to give us, so we can give them what they want. Think of it as cooperation. Talia's thoughts spun, threads of questions tangling with the raw fact that this was not just bullying anymore, it was something calculated, something bought and paid for. Her mind flickered to Malik's face, the weight of his safety pressing against her ribs. Connor scrolled through more messages. Each line made the air heavier. Demands for specific information, requests for photographs, questions about daily routines. The kind of data you could only get by being close. The others shifted subtly around her. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to make her feel the invisible walls closing in. She could sense the unspoken agreement between them. This was not about truth or fairness. It was about possession. They had her here, in their chosen ground, and they would use that advantage until it broke her. Lena dropped the tripod onto the table with a clatter, breaking the silence. We can get twice that amount if we make it convincing, she said, her eyes glinting in the harsh light. The greed in the room was almost tangible. It was not loud or dramatic. It was in the way their eyes lingered on the laptop screen, in the way fingers tapped restlessly against chair arms, in the way no one questioned the morality of the offer. Talia felt the muscles in her shoulders tighten, every instinct telling her that her next move had to be precise. She was not ready to speak. Every word would be measured against their intentions. Instead, she let the silence stretch, forcing them to fill it. Connor leaned back, as if satisfied with the effect. You could make this very easy, Talia, or you could make it very difficult. The outcome is yours to choose. She did not answer. The portable light buzzed faintly, casting a harsh glow that exaggerated every crease in the peeling walls, every sharp line of their faces. Talia's gaze shifted from one to the other, cataloging expressions, noting who avoided her eyes and who stared too intently. Her focus returned to the laptop. The digits of the deposit seemed to burn brighter than the screen itself. It was a number meant to seduce, to corrupt, and in the eyes of the people surrounding her, it had already done its work. Lena was the one to break the tension. She stepped forward, her keys jingling as she gave them a deliberate shake, the metallic sound echoing in the tight space. We have the perfect place to talk more privately, she said, her voice slow, almost savoring the moment. The keys swung in her hand, catching the light for a brief flash. The sound was not loud, but it carried with it a promise, or a threat, of whatever came next. Talia's heart pounded once. Hard. She knew that whatever waited beyond this moment would not be a conversation. And in the shared silence before anyone moved, she understood that the real danger was not the walls closing in. It was the number on that screen, and the way it had turned every gaze in the room into something sharp, something hungry. The light from the laptop cast a cold rectangle across the makeshift table, washing every face in a pale glow. The buzz of the portable lamp hummed like an insect in a jar. Talia stood very still, her gaze fixed on the digits of the deposit pulsing on the screen. She could feel the hunger that number awoke in the room without needing to look at anyone. It was in the way shoulders leaned forward, in the hush that followed each breath. A new window bloomed on the screen. The rectangle flickered, then resolved into Naomi's face. The video call framed her from the shoulders up. She sat in a dim room, a single lamp behind her throwing a tired circle on the wall. Her eyes were too wide, as if sleep had not touched them in days. Her lips pressed into a thin line and trembled, then pressed again. She swallowed once before she spoke. "Talia," Naomi said. Her voice was hushed but clear, as if she had chosen each word before she allowed it to leave her mouth. "You are there." Sierra drifted into view, her tone light as thread. "We thought it would be helpful if you explained a few things." Connor turned the laptop slightly, angling it so that both Talia and the group could see. He did not speak. He did not need to. The message list he had shown moments earlier lay behind the call like a second layer of ice. Talia kept her hands at her sides. "Naomi," she said, "where are you?" Naomi looked off camera, then back. "Home," she answered softly. "I could not. I did not want to be there." Talia studied her friend's face. Anxiety moved through Naomi like a second pulse. She was braced for impact, as if expecting the next blow and trying to stand as straight as she could when it arrived. On the table, Connor tapped a key. Another window slid over the call, sharing the screen with it. A calendar of classes, lunch periods, club meetings, bus schedules. Every entry belonged to Talia. Naomi flinched when she saw it. "Please," she whispered, "do not show her like that." "What is there to hide?" Sierra asked, smooth as a blade. "Friends help friends. You have been very helpful." The calendar scrolled. There was the stamp of Talia's training runs before dawn. There were the days she stayed after school to help with science tutoring. There were the afternoons when she left campus early to meet Malik for groceries on his late shift. It was not simply a schedule, it was a map of her life. Talia's voice was quiet. "You gave them my routine." Her words did not accuse, they named. The room seemed to tilt. Naomi's eyes shimmered. She shook her head quickly, then slowly, as if neither direction could hold the truth. "I did," she said. "I did, but it was not what you think. I thought—" She stopped, gathered her breath. "He told me it was to keep you safe." "Who told you?" Talia asked, though she had already felt the answer forming like a bruise. The video feed shuddered. Another window overrode the calendar. A grainy clip filled the screen, stamped with a time code and washed in the washed-out color of cheap security footage. In it, Malik stood in a parking lot under a sodium lamp. His shoulders were squared, his face in three-quarter profile. A man in a dark jacket approached. The figure spoke without sound. The man handed Malik a small package. Malik took it and slipped it into his jacket. The clip ended. Talia stared. For a heartbeat, she could not think. There was only the broad shape of the image and the way it struck the air from her lungs. Then details filtered in, quiet but insistent. The light fell wrong across Malik's cheek. The edges of the jacket flickered for a frame, as if cut and pasted by an impatient hand. When Malik turned, his shadow did not match the angle of the lamp. "This is not real," Talia said. Calm returned to her voice like a practice habit. "It is altered." "Oh." Naomi nodded with desperate relief, as if she had been hoping Talia would say exactly that. "Deep fake," she whispered. "He said it was a demonstration." Her voice faltered, then steadied. "He said if I did not cooperate, he would send it to the precinct and to your brother's supervisor. He said there would be an inquiry. He said it would stick because people believe what they see." Sierra lifted a shoulder. "People do believe what they see." Naomi's gaze slid away from the camera, then back. "He also said he knows the scholarship committee that is reviewing Jordan," she added, her voice breaking on her brother's name. "He said one message from him, and the application would fall to the bottom of the pile. He said my family would lose that chance for good." Jordan. The name landed in Talia's chest with a dull ache. She remembered the boy's eager questions about circuits and engines, the way he had sat on the curb last summer to watch Malik change the spark plugs of an old car. She knew what that scholarship meant. It was not a number on a form, it was a door. "Who is he?" Talia asked. though again she felt the answer moving toward her like a slow tide. Naomi did not say the name, but the shape of it lived behind her eyes. "He said to call him Captain," she whispered. "He said he had been a captain once and still knew how to make calls when he needed them. He told me he was doing this to protect the school, that you and Malik were a risk because of the way you carry yourselves. He said some people disrupt order without meaning to, and sometimes the only way to keep them from being hurt is to keep them in place." The words reeked of old habits dressed in new language. Talia felt a cold steadiness settle through her. She saw Naomi as if across a narrow river, close enough to touch, yet separated by a current that could pull them both under if they stepped wrong. "Why did you not tell me?" Talia asked. The question was simple. Beneath it lay the jagged edge of hurt. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them slowly. "Because I was afraid," she said. "Because I believed him when he said you would do something brave and it would make everything worse. Because I thought if I kept you visible, if I told him where you were at all times, he would not need to send anyone to find you. He said if I cooperated, he would leave you alone." Sierra's laugh was soft and thin. "How noble." "Be quiet," Talia said, not turning her head. Her voice was low, and it cut through the room more cleanly than any shout. For a heartbeat, there was silence. On the screen, Naomi leaned closer. "I am sorry," she said. "I am so sorry. I did not know where to put the fear. I put it in the wrong place." Her eyes brimmed, but she did not cry. She bit her lip hard enough to whiten the flesh. Then she glanced off screen again, as if listening. A tiny delay entered the call. A stutter Talia felt, rather than heard. "Naomi," Talia said, "where is he now?" Naomi shook her head just enough to answer without words. "I cannot talk longer," she whispered. "They told me to keep this brief." She forced herself to look at Talia, to hold the gaze. "Please do not do anything rash. Please stay where people can see you." Talia almost smiled at the bitter irony of it. "People are seeing me," she said. "They are seeing exactly what they want." Naomi swallowed. Her mouth formed the beginning of another apology. She did not speak it. She pressed her lips together, then bit them once, as if choosing pain over speech. Her thumb moved off screen. The call ended. The screen went dark and reflective, a black pane holding the ghost of Talia's face. The portable lamp buzzed. The air felt thinner. For a long second, no one moved. Talia could hear her own breath and the slow tick of a pipe cooling in the wall. Her anger stood beside her like a person. So did her grief. They did not fight for space. They waited, patient and heavy, asking her to pick one to wear. She kept her hands at her sides. She did not look away from the blank screen. In the faint mirror of it, her eyes met her own. Behind her reflection, another shape gathered. At first, it was only the suggestion of height, a darker curve absorbing the light at the edge of the frame. Then it sharpened. The outline of a shoulder, the square of a chest, the forward tilt of a head leaning into the doorway behind Connor. It did not belong to anyone already in the room. It waited just outside the circle of the lamp's reach, half in shadow, half in the hall. Talia did not turn. She did not need to. The silhouette stood like a mark drawn by a decisive hand. In the black glass, her reflection and the stranger's shadow held each other for a breath that felt very long. Then the lamp hummed a little louder, as if the room itself had understood that whatever had been set in motion would not slow now. The room seemed to fold in on itself once the last voice fell silent. The stale air hung heavy, saturated with the aftertaste of tension. The flicker of the lone portable light shivered across the peeling tiles, its metal cage rattling softly with each sway. In the corner, the whir of the old camera was a constant, faintly metallic buzz, like a small insect trapped inside its own glass prison. Talia sat perfectly still on the rickety chair they had shoved her into. Her wrists were free now, but the stiffness in her shoulders made it feel as if invisible ropes still bound her. She lowered her eyes, letting her breath slow until she could hear the soft rhythm of her own lungs. In, out, in, out. She counted silently. It was not for calm, it was for control. The steady cycle of air was the only metronome she trusted in this room. Across from her, Aubrey was pacing like a caged predator, arms folded tightly, jaw twitching. "We should just wrap it up," Aubrey muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. "This is dragging on and he will not like it." Maya, sitting on the edge of an overturned desk, snapped her head up. "Wrap it up? We have barely scratched the surface. Do you think this is some after-school detention?" He paid for results. That is exactly why we need to end it before it becomes a problem, Aubrey shot back, her voice low but sharp, like a blade drawn just enough to glint. The longer she is here, the greater the risk. We have already taken enough heat from the last time. The camera's hum seemed louder now, as though it leaned in to catch every word. Talia lifted her gaze just enough to watch them from beneath her lashes. The words between them were jagged, sparking off the walls, but the undercurrent was more revealing, the twitch in Aubrey's hands, the way Maya's heel tapped against the tile in a rapid, impatient beat. It was in these details that Talia saw the beginning of a fracture. She let her breathing fall into the quiet spaces between their sentences, storing each gesture, each slip of tone. The more they spoke, the less they watched her. Aubrey halted mid-stride, glancing toward the door. If Connor tells him about the delay, Maya interrupted, her voice rising. Connor answers to me when Rourke is not here, and I say we keep her until we get something worth keeping. Talia's fingers curled against the rough wood of the chair's arm. Worth keeping. The phrase was ugly in its casual cruelty, but it told her something important. Maya was not speaking about her safety, only her value. That value, whatever it was, might keep her alive longer, but it also made her a prize worth fighting over. She inhaled, held the air in her lungs, and exhaled slowly, as if releasing her fear molecule by molecule. This was the breathing room she needed. Her mind began to map the room as though it were a chessboard. Aubrey stood near the door, the natural guard, her body angled toward escape routes. Maya was closer to the center, where the overturned desk and the cluster of chairs made it harder to move quickly. Between them lay a strip of open tile, narrow, but navigable if someone was fast enough. The real gap, though, was not physical. It was the widening rift between their intentions. Aubrey wanted this over. Maya wanted it prolonged. Somewhere in that difference was the space Talia could step into. Maya's voice sliced through again. You have always been too cautious, Aubrey. That is why Rourke has to keep pulling you back in. And you have always been reckless? Aubrey replied, leaning forward, her shadow stretching long in the flickering light. That is why Rourke cleans up after you. The air crackled. For a moment, they were so locked on each other that Talia felt invisible. It was dangerous, but it was also an invitation. Her pulse quickened, but she forced her face into stillness. No sudden moves. She tilted her head slightly, as if simply adjusting her neck, but her eyes tracked every inch of their standoff. This could be it, she thought. Her breathing shifted, still slow, but now deliberate, like the subtle winding of a spring. In her mind, she rehearsed the timing. Wait until their voices climbed, until their focus narrowed entirely on their own grievances. Then move. Not yet. Not while the light still wavered and shadows played tricks on the walls. Aubrey broke eye contact first, looking away as though the fight had exhausted her. You are making this harder than it needs to be, she muttered. Sometimes harder is the only way to get the truth, Maya replied, but there was less bite in her tone now. The lull was fragile, like a surface just beginning to ice over. Talia's eyes caught a faint movement, a shadow slipping under the doorframe. The camera's low whir masked the sound at first, but then it came, the measured, echoing beat of boots on the hallway tiles. Slow at first, then quicker, more deliberate. Both Aubrey and Maya turned toward the door, their quarrel momentarily suspended. The boots drew nearer, each step carrying a weight that seemed to pull the temperature of the room down a degree. Then came the voice, deep, roughened by years of command, unmistakable. Bring her to the truck. Rourke. The sound hung in the air, dense and final, like a verdict. Maya's jaw tightened. Aubrey's shoulders squared. The tension that had been theirs alone now expanded, filling every corner, pressing against Talia's skin. Her plan, whatever shape it might have taken, had just narrowed to a point. The fracture between them was still there, but now Rourke's order was the hammer that could force them to seal it or shatter it entirely. The boots stopped outside the door. Silence followed, the kind that makes the air feel too thick to breathe. Talia's eyes stayed locked on that narrow gap beneath the door, waiting for the shadow to break into the room. Her breath steadied again, but now it was not for control alone. It was for readiness. The door did not open so much as it detonated. Metal struck peeling plaster with a hollow clap, and the vibration ran up the wall like a pulse. Talia flinched instinctively, though her spine stayed erect. Rourke entered first. He did not need to announce himself. The air shifted around him. A man built like a verdict, broad-shouldered, narrow-eyed, carrying the stillness of someone who had learned to wait before breaking the world in half. His contract windbreaker hung loose, but nothing about him felt civilian. Two men in plain clothes followed. They carried no visible weapons, but the set of their jaws was armament enough. Their eyes swept the room in practiced arcs, marking exits, measuring distances, cataloging every twitch. Sierra's knuckles whitened on the camera tripod. Connor stood half a step in front of her, as if that half step could matter. "Out," Rourke said. One syllable, low and flat. Sierra blinked. "We have the footage." "You have what I let you have," he interrupted, his tone stripped of effort. His gaze moved past them as if they were not obstacles but furniture. "You are finished here." Connor's throat worked. You were told to keep her warm until I arrived." Rourke's chin dipped toward Talia. "Now she answers to me." The room's silence grew teeth. One of Rourke's men stepped forward, unhooking the camera from its mount with a casualness that felt cruel. Sierra tried to protest. Rourke's glance pinned her like a hand to the chest. The protest dissolved. Talia sat perfectly still. Inside, her pulse was climbing, but she kept her breathing steady. She counted each inhale, each exhale, anchoring herself to the rhythm. This was not fear, it was calibration. Rourke moved to the center of the room. He stood over her, the fluorescent light cutting across his cheekbones. His voice dropped into something colder. "Your name, your movements, who you meet. We are going to make this easy." The plainclothes man to his left adjusted the lens. The other set a portable light on the floor. Harsh white filled the space, erasing corners, erasing shadows. Talia raised her eyes to meet Rourke's. There was no tremor in her gaze. She would give him nothing, not a flinch, not a blink, until she chose. Then something caught at the edge of her vision. Beyond the blinding lamp, tucked into the far corner near a stack of warped desks, a camera watched her, not one of theirs, smaller. Its lens ringed with a faint red glow, warmer, pulsing. Different. Recognition struck like a match in the dark. That was not a recording device. That was Harper's field transmitter. A narrowband unit, capable of sending a live feed past the building's dead zones. She felt the smallest tightening in her chest. The camera's red eye blinked once, as if to tell her it was listening. Hope, unexpected and sharp, lanced through the fog of the room. She masked it instantly, allowing only the smallest flicker to cross her expression, a flicker she buried in the space of a breath. But Harper, if he was on the other end, would know that flicker. He would know she had seen him. Rourke leaned closer, misreading the glint in her eyes as defiance. "You think you will outlast me?" Talia did not answer. She was no longer thinking of outlasting him. She was thinking of using him. The more he spoke, the more his voice would carry into Harper's signal. The more Rourke demanded, the more evidence Harper could capture. For the first time since the door had burst open, Talia felt the balance of the room shift, not enough to save her yet, but enough to breathe. Her gaze held steady. Somewhere behind her calm, a clock had begun ticking. And somewhere, far from this abandoned wing, someone else was now watching. Outside the fractured shell of the abandoned wing, Harper knelt in the shadow of a crumbling maintenance shed. The wind cut along the side of the building, lifting the smell of dust and rusted metal into the air. In his palm, the portable receiver pulsed with the steady heartbeat of the transmitter he had hidden inside. Through its narrow feed, he could see the harsh light washing over Talia's face. Rourke's shadow moved like a tide across the cracked linoleum floor. Every so often, Sierra's pale silhouette flickered in the periphery, unsettled but bound by the silent dominance of the man now running the room. Harper's fingers moved over the compact keyboard attached to his device. A green icon blinked to life. Connection established. With a practice sequence, he sent a silent burst to Malik's encrypted channel. Miles away, Malik's voice crackled through on a secure band. "Harper? She is inside the old East Wing," Harper murmured. "North corridor, second floor, third door past the utility stairwell. You have 5 minutes, maybe less." A pause. Then Malik's breath over the line, steady but taut. "We will make it." Harper's gaze darted toward the eastern perimeter of the school grounds. Beyond the chain-link fence, the east gate shimmered in the weak afternoon light. It was still open, unguarded but vulnerable. He tapped a second command into the device, linking into the school's outdated security network. The camera feed stuttered, went black for half a breath, and then the gate locks engaged with a muted clank. The east exit was sealed. He leaned back on his heels, scanning the yard. The main security post was 50 yards away, manned by 2 guards who thought they were just watching empty asphalt. Harper sent them a burst message, masked as an administrative order. Gate secured for maintenance. Do not override. The less interference, the better. Inside, Rook's eyes narrowed. He was not looking at Talia now. He was looking at the far wall, where the humming fluorescent lights flickered once, then steadied. He turned to one of his men. We have company. Harper's feed stuttered again. The signal strength dropped from green to amber. His gut tightened. Rourke had found the frequency. In the control room 2 floors down, Rourke's other associate was pulling power from the breaker panels one by one. First, the hallway lights dimmed. Then the East Wing's backup generator faltered. Harper's fingers blurred over the controls, trying to maintain the link, but the screen bloomed with static. Amber dropped to red. He exhaled once, sharply. A low thump echoed across the yard as the final breaker tripped. The East Wing drowned in darkness. Harper slipped the earpiece from his jacket pocket, pressing it to his lips. Talia, he whispered, barely above the wind. If you can hear me, hold on. Just a few more minutes. Inside, the world had become pure shadow. The oppressive white light was gone, replaced by the texture of the dark, breath against breath, the faint scuff of shoes on grit. Talia sat very still, her heartbeat loud in her ears, then a faint vibration under her collarbone. She touched the hidden seam in her jacket, felt the almost weightless disc of the embedded earpiece. Harper's voice slid through the static like a hand through water. Come Kurthem vi foot. The words carried more than instruction. They carried a promise. Talia let out a slow breath, the air cool against her lips. Somewhere in the dark, she knew Rourke was moving toward her again. But now she also knew someone was moving toward him. She shifted her weight slightly, as if testing the floor beneath her feet, not in surrender, but in preparation. The dark was no longer empty. The first sound was not a door. It was the air changing. A faint shift in pressure, as if the hallway beyond had inhaled and was about to exhale something dangerous into the room. Then the far door swung open with a metallic crack, its hinges protesting like an old hinge wrenched awake. The echo sprinted down the length of the corridor, rebounding off the chipped plaster walls. Malik stepped in first. The low light from the single swinging bulb overhead carved his features into hard lines. Brow set, jaw clenched, eyes scanning without a flicker of hesitation. 2 figures moved in close behind him, shoulders squared, bodies angled in that silent language of people trained to move as one. Their boots struck the warped linoleum with a measured cadence, not rushing, but never wasting a step. They had come from the north entrance. The one Harper had told Talia earlier was locked to anyone without the right code and the nerve to use it. Before anyone could speak, a side door creaked inward on the opposite wall. Harper slipped through, his presence less an arrival than a quiet infiltration. He hugged the shadow line cast by the cracked window panes, the edges of his coat brushing the peeling paint. He did not rush. Every step looked mapped in his mind before his foot found the floor, like a chess player sliding into a critical endgame. His gaze swept the space with surgical precision, cataloging every position, where Malik's team stood, where Talia was, where the threats were. His eyes lingered a heartbeat longer on Sierra. She was posted at the only unlocked exit. The frame behind her was lit by the cold spill of light from the hallway, outlining her in stark relief. Her back pressed lightly against the wood, as if she owned that threshold. In her right hand, a loop of brass keys swung slightly, catching glints from the bulb. In her left, a phone stood upright, the pale glow spilling across her cheek and jaw, drawing a hard diagonal that turned her expression into a half-lit mask. No one moves, Sierra said. Her tone was too controlled to be casual. Each word seemed weighed before it left her mouth. Unless someone wants this streamed to the entire school before the first bell tomorrow. The word streamed had weight. It was not just a threat, it was a promise of exposure, a signal flare that could ignite 100 more fires before anyone here put it out. Talia stood in the center, her body still, but her skin prickled with the shift in the air. She could feel the geometry of the moment, 3 forces locked into a triangle, none willing to turn their back on the others. The tension was a living thing, coiling in the space between them, waiting for someone, anyone, to make the wrong move. Malik's men froze mid-step, their eyes narrowing as they measured the angle from Sierra's phone to Talia's position. Harper stayed silent. His gaze ticked between the phone in Sierra's hand and the subtle white of her knuckles where she gripped the keys. That tiny tremor in her thumb did not escape him. It was not rehearsed control, it was improvised, and that made it unpredictable. Sierra's eyes locked on Talia. "I have been patient," she said, her voice tightening. "I have watched you dodge questions, vanish when it suited you, and somehow pull every adult in this place into your corner. Not anymore. Someone explains right now, or I press this button." She tipped the phone slightly forward, just enough for the faint red glow of the recording light to flare into view. The sight sent a pulse of heat through Talia's chest. Her throat was dry, her jaw tense. Sierra's tone was not the pure venom of an enemy, it was something else. Something desperate. Beneath the steel, there was the brittle edge of a person terrified of being shut out of a game they had once thought they could control. Malik shifted his weight forward, one foot making the floor sigh. His intent was obvious, but Harper's arm rose in a quick, silent gesture, palm outward, fingers steady. "Not yet," he said, his voice low and precise, pitched so only Malik could hear. For the first time since entering, Harper's eyes found Talia and stayed there. The look he gave her was neither command nor request. It was a transfer, a quiet offering of the moment itself. "This is yours if you choose to take it." Talia felt that weight settle over her shoulders like a mantle. The room seemed to shrink, pulling all sound into the slow, deliberate beat of her heart. She thought of Naomi's voice on that fractured call, of the shadows in the abandoned wing, of the whispered instruction to hold on. Every road, every sting of betrayal, had led here. Her fingers flexed once at her sides, as if feeling the edges of the decision she was about to make. She let the air fill her lungs in a slow, measured breath, feeling its weight settle her spine. Then she stepped forward. The groan of the warped floorboards under her shoe felt louder than any shout. Sierra's eyes widened a fraction, the first real slip in her composure. She had not anticipated movement from Talia first. Talia's gaze rose, locking on Sierra's eyes with a steadiness that was almost unnatural. There was no darting glance toward Malik for reassurance, no flicker toward Harper for instruction. Just an unblinking, deliberate focus that cut through the air like drawn glass. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them was its own language, a question and an answer, a dare and a warning, all folded into the space of a breath. Around them, the other stayed frozen. Malik's men shifted their stance subtly, weight balanced on the balls of their feet, ready to move at the smallest sign. Harper remained in the shadows, his hand lowered now but his attention razor sharp. The room was balanced on a blade. Every heartbeat was a choice waiting to happen. And all eyes, willingly or not, were turning toward Talia. The air in the abandoned wing was so tight it seemed to press against skin and bone. The light from Sierra's phone still glowed faintly, but now it was no longer a weapon. It was a fragile lantern between storms. Talia's hands moved slowly, each gesture deliberate, as if she were dismantling a trap one wire at a time. From her pocket, she drew her own phone. The screen flared to life, its glow cutting a sharp path across the dust motes, drifting between her and Sierra. "You want the truth," Talia said, her voice low but without tremor. "Look at this." Her thumb slid over the glass, and an email bloomed on the screen. The sender line read, "Northbridge Protective Services." Below it, a single image filled the frame, an official-looking payment confirmation stamped with the date, the amount, and a cold, unblinking QR code. The numbers in the transfer were obscene in their precision, large enough to pay for silence, loyalty, and complicity all at once. Sierra's eyes locked on the figures. She didn't move for a heartbeat, then another, as if her mind were replaying every conversation, every order she had followed in the past weeks. Her grip on the brass keys slackened, the faint jangle loud in the heavy air. "This is not possible," she whispered. But the words rang hollow even to herself. Behind her, Rourke's voice tore through the quiet. "Do not listen to her." His tone cracked like a whip, trying to bind the room back under his control. "This is fabricated, digital garbage made to stir doubt. You know who you are working for, Sierra. You know your place." Sierra's gaze did not leave the screen. She tapped the image once, enlarging it. The QR code shimmered into sharper focus, its pattern unmistakable to anyone who had ever been given one as a proof of payout. Her breath caught. She remembered an almost identical code she had once been shown by Rourke. Only then, it had been accompanied by promises, not commands. Her voice was quieter now, but every syllable was carved in stone. So I was never your partner. You were essential, Rourke shot back, stepping closer, his shadow stretching over both of them. Every operation needs someone to carry the weight on the ground. That is not being a pawn, it is being trusted. Talia could hear the desperation behind his precision. She watched Sierra's face change, anger sharpening into something colder, a realization that left no safe place to stand. The silence between them fractured when Sierra turned, the keys in her palm now clenched with purpose. She crossed the few feet to Harper without once looking back at Rourke. The metal clicked against Harper's hand, a sound that was less about unlocking a door and more about transferring power. Harper's fingers closed around the keys, his eyes meeting Sierra's with the faintest nod. It was not gratitude exactly, but recognition. A silent acknowledgement that the line she had crossed could not be uncrossed. Then Harper moved. The shift was sudden but controlled, the way a trap springs only after it has been perfectly set. In 2 long strides, he was in front of Rourke, one arm securing the man's shoulder, while the other drew a set of flex cuffs from his jacket. The plastic bands snapped around Rourke's wrists with a finality that seemed to drain the last of his defiance. You are under arrest, Harper said, his voice as clear and precise as a strike to the center of the chest. Charges include conspiracy, unlawful detention, and contracting under fraudulent credentials. Rourke's protests rose, raw and tangled, but no one moved to help him now. Malik's men stepped in to escort him toward the door, their presence a silent wall against escape. Talia stood where she had been, her phone still in her hand. The room felt different, emptied of the constant, suffocating pressure. Yet beneath that relief was a deeper pulse, a knowledge that this was only one piece of a larger shape. Harper turned toward her. His eyes, sharp and unwavering, held none of the satisfaction that should have come from a clean arrest. Instead, they carried something heavier. The one who paid for all of this, he said, his voice dropping into the stillness, is still out there. The words settled over Talia like a shadow stretching into the future, long, cold, and impossible to ignore. The auditorium of Maple Ridge High was lit in the warm glow of late afternoon, sunlight spilling in long amber stripes through the high windows. The banners above the stage fluttered gently in the faint hum of the air conditioning, each marked with the school's crest and a simple phrase, "Stand together." Rows of students filled the seats, their chatter rising and falling in uneven waves before dissolving into a respectful quiet. At the podium, Talia stood in a tailored navy blazer over a soft cream blouse. Her posture was steady, her hands resting lightly on the wooden surface as though it anchored her to the moment. 6 months ago, she had walked through these halls as a target, her every step shadowed by whispers, by calculated malice. Now she was here to speak, not about what had been done to her, but about what could be done differently. She began slowly, her voice clear enough to reach the farthest corner without strain. She spoke of the quiet cruelty that begins in hallways, of the small moments when someone chooses to look away instead of speak up. She spoke of how racism does not always roar. Sometimes it smiles politely while pushing someone out of line. Her words held weight, not because they were loud, but because they were measured, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Near the back, Sierra sat with the other participants in the school's rehabilitation program. The orange trim on her program-issued jacket was the only vivid color she wore, but her face had changed. She no longer looked like a girl moving with the safety of a pack. She leaned forward now, elbows on her knees, listening as if she had something to learn rather than something to prove. Naomi sat 2 seats away. Her public apology had been given months ago, broadcast over the school's own channel. The words had been awkward, faltering, but they had been hers. Now, she nodded along to Talia's sentences, her eyes lowering only when Talia mentioned the cost of silence. When the speech ended, the applause was not explosive. It was steady, sustained, and real. Talia stepped down from the podium, shaking hands with faculty and students. She spotted Malik leaning against the wall near the exit, his arms folded. There was pride in his expression, pride that was unmistakable, but beneath it was something else, a careful watchfulness that had never left him since the night of the abandoned wing. She reached him, and for a moment they did not speak. They did not need to. His nod was small but certain. Then, Harper appeared from the side corridor, moving with the unhurried pace of someone who had already seen the day's most important moment. In his hand was a plain brown envelope, creased at the corners. He waited until Talia was within arm's reach before offering it. "You should see this," he said quietly. She took the envelope and slid her fingers along the flap. Inside, there was only a single slip of paper, an old thermal receipt, the kind that fades over time until the ink blurs. In the upper right corner, faint but undeniable, was a circular seal, Northbridge Protective Services. The date was recent. Talia stared at it, her pulse quickening. The seal might have been nothing to someone else, but to her it was the echo of a voice still speaking from the shadows. The puppeteer had not disappeared. The threads were still being pulled, just farther from the light. Her eyes lifted to Harper, who held her gaze without speaking. Malik shifted beside her, scanning the crowd still lingering in the hallway. The paper trembled slightly in her hand, though not from fear alone. It was the weight of knowing that her fight had not ended. It had only stepped onto a larger stage. She folded the slip carefully, as if it might dissolve if handled too roughly, and tucked it into her pocket. For a moment, she let herself breathe. Then, as the students began to spill out into the late sunlight, she looked toward the far doors of the auditorium. The camera of the mind closed in, her eyes, steady and sharp, catching the light. Behind them was the flicker of worry, the shadow of what she now understood was coming. But layered over, that was something else. Something stronger. A quiet, unwavering resolve. The fight was not over, and she was ready. The last of the applause faded, swallowed by the long hallway beyond the auditorium doors. Talia stood in the quiet that followed, her fingers still brushing the folded receipt in her pocket. Outside, the late afternoon sun poured gold over the school lawn, casting long shadows that reached almost to her feet. They looked like the threads of an unseen loom, some dark, some light, interwoven into patterns she could not yet fully see. She had spoken her truth, and in that moment it had felt like a solid thing, a stone in her hand she could pass to anyone willing to carry it. But she knew now that one speech did not undo years of silence. One moment of courage could spark a flame, yes, but it needed tending if it was to survive the wind. The faces she had seen today, some eager, some uncertain, some still hardened, reminded her of that. Change rarely arrives in thunderclaps. More often, it walks in on quiet feet, knocking softly until enough people are ready to open the door. As the crowd thinned, Malik stepped up beside her. "You did well," he said simply, but his eyes held the rest. "You are not alone in this." Harper lingered a few paces back, watching them both, the brown envelope still absent from his hand but heavier now in her thoughts than when she first held it. The fight ahead would be different from the one behind her. It would be slower, more cunning, fought not just in hallways but in boardrooms, inboxes, and the dim corners where decisions are made without witnesses. And yet, she was not afraid. Because if the past 6 months had taught her anything, it was this. Justice is not a single victory, but the willingness to keep showing up after the cheers have faded. It is the choice to stand when it would be easier to sit, to speak when silence would cost less, to notice the small cruelties before they grow into storms. Somewhere in the world, someone might be holding their own folded receipt, evidence of harm, proof of betrayal, and wondering if they are strong enough to act. To them, Talia would say, "You are." And to those who have walked alongside her here, through each step of this story, perhaps you carry your own moments, your own turning points. Share them, speak them aloud. Let them be heard, because change begins with the stories we refuse to bury. If this journey moved you, linger a while in the space it opened. Leave your thoughts, your reflections, your own fragments of truth. And if you wish to stand with us in the chapters yet to be written, stay close. The next part of this fight is coming, and every voice will matter.